matter who you are, where you are, what your choices have been, and what karmic timelines and contracts you have journeyed, the light is calling for the reunification of all aspects of life in this realm now. It is calling for the cleansing of all polarities. It is calling for the rising of all sacred heart centers now. All are being summoned home to the greater light now.
Hi, and welcome to Whole Soul Mastery's Live Well, Live Whole podcast series, where we inspire and empower wholeness and integration. I'm Marie Moeller, and I'm an author, intuitive, and a host of these podcasts. And I'm back again today with Joseph Pio Asterita, who was here a month ago, I believe. And we talked about ley lines and earthquakes and energy clearing and sacred geometry, among some other things. And so, Joseph, thank you for joining me again today.
Always a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. And Joseph is going to share some stories with us that have some interesting themes that center. One story is going to be about connecting with the elemental kingdom and air spirits. One story is going to be talking about essentially a spiritual quest and energy clearings. And I think there's another component to that in the second story. And then the fourth story is going to be about an energy clearing. It was really powerful, and I think you've even used the word gut-wrenching, an energy clearing on a battleground. And so, because I think it's amazing when stories come to life. We can have the concept of the spiritual journeys that we all make, right? We can have the stories we tell ourselves, but we can have the concept of living a spiritual life, and then we can actually embrace the journey and be conscious of ourselves moving in the journey. And I love when people are willing to come on and share their stories in the journey. And Joseph, I think you're going to deliver on that today. So Thank you for joining me. And I'm going to just toss it to you and have you, share the beginning of the first story for sure.
Sure. The first story is an aviation adventure. When I was in Air Force in 1967, I was stationed in Amarillo, Texas, which is in the Panhandle. And I was going for my commercial pilot certificate. I didn't fly for the Air Force. I was a maintenance instructor, but there was a small airport near the base that we could go rent planes. And so we rented, my friend Al, who was my co-pilot, we rented a Mooney Super 21, 200 horsepower turbocharged stallion of an airplane, just really fast, cruise at 155 knots. And we're going to fly from Texas to New York with a stopover in Dayton, Ohio, which is where my brother was stationed at the time. I'm going to spend the night with him and then continue. So it's a story about that. And the reason why I'm flashing back, even though there was like, what, 54 years ago, is that was my first introduction to what the elemental kingdom was all about, because there was quite an encounter, to say the least, with the air spirits as we were flying out there. So, are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay, so it was in late 1967, and we took off from Tradewinds Airport in Amarillo, and we were just right over Oklahoma, heading out through Kansas, just zipping along at we had quite a ground speed because we had a big tailwind. And the weather was clear. But as we were flying out there, we were checking with the FAA, and they were saying there's a fast-moving cold front coming out of Canada, and it may interrupt your trip. So that was like right out of the gate, things ain't going to get too good. So let me share the screen.
Yes.
There. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, so I call this part of the adventure the castles in the clouds, because that's what we encountered on the way. It was quite amazing, and I don't think I've never seen it in all my commercial flying at all. So here's the airplane, Mooney Super 21. This is a file photo I got off the internet. Okay. So it's, as you can tell, but if you're looking at that wing, it's a high performance airplane. It's that laminar wing. So it's designed to move really fast for a four-seater. Again, cruise at 155 knots, which is about maybe 170, 165 miles an hour.
Wow.
So we're heading out over Kansas, closing in on Missouri, just zipping right along. And the FAA comes back and is giving us these weather briefings, like things are really getting pretty bad. Up ahead, we still had some time to go. So that the clouds underneath us started to form. Now we were at 7,500 feet, and you see this broken, scattered to broken cloud deck was below us.
Wow.
And so you can see the ground. We were navigating fine, on course, on time, on schedule. Everything was going good. But then the clouds started to get more intense, and we had to go up a little bit higher to stay above the clouds. So when you head west, you got to stay at an odd altitude, plus 500 feet. So we went up to 9,500 feet, still zipping along, but this is getting worse now. Now it can't see the ground anymore, and the FAA is coming back and telling us, hey, that cold front's moving in quicker and the serious conditions up ahead. So we figured we better get down before we got trapped above the clouds and couldn't get in, because we weren't necessarily instrument rated at that time. We always had to stay with visual contact to the ground. So you see a hole there. We saw a hole in the clouds. It was a lot more overcast than this, but above this, we were smooth air, and it was dramatically beautiful. The sun was brilliant. It was a deep blue sky, and the sun reflected off the clouds, and calm, stable air. And you almost don't want to leave this type of situation, because it's just smooth flying. The engine's humming perfectly. We're going through checkpoints after checkpoints, but
There's a feeling of serenity and a kind of bliss. It's, that's what we all seek to achieve in meditation. People want to experience what you were experiencing in flight.
yes, similar to that. Thank you. So anyway, we find one of these holes to go down. Because I could look down, I could see all the way down 9,500 feet, and there was the ground. So I said, we got to get down there. So now, the way you descend like that is to cut power and you start your descent. However, there was such a small space we had to get into, even though I had reduced power dramatically. The plane was too fast to make that tight turn without us really doing some violent maneuvering, like standing up on the wing and doing a spiral turn down. So what I had to do is drop my landing gear, as you can see, and this is another file photo.
Yes.
Landing gear down, flaps down, to really slow the aircraft down so we could do a slow turn, but descend rapidly. Otherwise, the thing just wanted to fly. They didn't want to come down,
Wow.
So as we're spiraling down, we went from 9,500 feet to 9,000, 8,500, 8,000, somewhere between 8,500 feet, 8,000 and 7,500 feet. We broke out into this cavern inside the clouds, this vast opening. It was tremendously beautiful. And it was not another cloud deck. So sometimes you come through a cloud deck and you're in open air, and then you go down into another cloud deck. We still had this hole we were spiraling down through, but we came into this tremendous open canyon. It was like a castle. I call it the castle in the clouds. And I did a drawing of this, which is not too good, because most of the money my mother gave me for drawing lessons, I went and I spent on ice cream and soda when I was a kid. So anyway, here is kind of like, don't laugh. Here's the hole up here we were coming down over here. All right, you see it up here?
Yes.
And here's the hole where we were going through. But as we came out, we were spiraling down. We see this tremendous open canyon or castle. And these were spires, if you see the spires here.
Yes.
Of clouds corkscrewing up. And they reflected a white and bluish tint all around. Everything was white and blue. It was amazing. I would say it was maybe a mile wide and maybe 2 miles long. Just it seemed to be there just for us. So Al is like going, "Oh my gosh, look at this," and I'm like, "Yes, definitely. So let's go look at this." So we started flying into here. Now we got to the point back here where we spiral out. So give you an idea of us and all of this around here. It seemed to be almost like this big, tremendous vault that we were flying through. But these spires, there was like another vault in here with the spires going up and spires all around here. And this was kind of like the middle of it. And it got that castle effect, like you were feeling in something just majestic.
Yes.
And now, when you have a high performance airplane like we were flying, and you have the gear down and the flaps down, the plane doesn't want to fly anymore. It just wants to come down. So it's kind of like getting a racehorse and kicking the spurs to tell it to race. That's the type of airplane we're on, but holding it back on the reins at the same time. So
Wow.
the thing is bouncing around. So it required a lot of good flying skills to maneuver this aircraft. I'm not bragging, but maybe I am. To keep this plane flying and staying within this corridor here and holding altitude, and just so we could see this majestic, we flew around here in this majestic area and spellbound, just looking out the window. I'm flying the airplane, and he's looking out the window, and we were just mystified. It was just the most beautiful, a very beautiful sight. And we got over here, and that hole was still there. I could look down and see the ground. So I went back I had to say goodbye because we had to get down. I didn't know how long this was going to last. But as we spiraled and went back down into that hole, and we could see the ground again. And the clouds were now like really closing in. They're just a tiny little spot where I could see down. So I kept spiraling down until I got to about like 2,500 feet. And we broke out of the clouds, but we were in this visibility was horrible, 3 miles in haze and fog, and the turbulence. We were bouncing like all heck. It was a tough flight after that, but hit full power, flaps up, gear up, and off we went. And we never made it to our destination of Dayton. We had to stop in Columbia, Missouri. We got weather down there. But the lesson here was, and I realized this later on, is that later on, 50 years later, 45 years later, working with the elemental kingdom and the air spirit specifically to do certain clearings. This was their message to me back in 1967. This is what we can do. I mean, they are tremendous beings, very powerful. I've had their presence at times and overwhelmingly strong. I mean, you feel like this big in front of this giant, tremendous Statue of Liberty, or that's how big they are. And also, there was like this analogy of being born or going from a spiritual plane, like we were first cruising up there at high altitude, just zipping along. Everything was ecstatically nice. And coming down into like the third dimension, which was the 2,500 feet, but that stopover in between mid-dimension is like, okay, we're here for you. This is, we're spirits at this realm. This is, we're going to show you what we can do. Remember that. So we went down and then came out, analogy speaking, into the third dimension, into this bouncing, turbulent, limited visibility, tough place to fly until we made it to our interim destination and landed. We got weathered down for about 2 days before we could go on. Everything was fine after that.
Isn't it amazing how you just described that? I mean, I'm hearing this for the first time, and our audience is too, obviously. But there's that interdimensional awareness that you were having in that experience. And just as you described that place where the elemental realms were seeding this message to you back in the 60s, right? Mm-hmm. Also seeding in your consciousness even then, because that's what I'm feeling now, is time isn't linear. They were planting the seed in your awareness for whenever it was time to activate more of that in your conscious daily life, which of course you had this after that experience, but you've had other experiences since then where you call that moment like suspended in grace. It's like you were suspended in grace in that castle in the sky, or the canyon in the sky. It feels a little of both in some ways. And then also when you descended down into about 2,500 feet and you feel all the haze and fog and low visibility and the storm, whatever all of that was, that is also a perfect metaphor for our world. We can get above the clouds, and even above the castle in the clouds, you had that experience of bliss and euphoria and serenity. So that those are like strata of consciousness that we can choose anytime. And you've perfectly illustrated that in this story. I mean, gosh.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. And yeah, that's that to me was one of the lessons of that trip. You know, that it's up there and we're down here, but it's there, and just have to kind of connect with it. You know, to end the story, Al and I parted in '68 or toward '69 when we were de-escalating from the war, Vietnam War, and I got out, went home. I did not. We kept in touch for a while, but I hadn't seen Al in 50 years, 52 years, and we finally met. In 52 years later, on a camping trip I had with my family upstate New York, where he had moved to, and we, you know, it was just a great reunion, and you know, hugging, patting on the back, how you doing? And then the first thing he said after we went through the lows, he said, "Hey, do you remember that flight we took in the moon where we flew through the clouds?" I go, "Yeah, how can you forget something like that?" You know, so
Well, it
yeah,
was obviously the two of you, like on that trip, vibrationally, you were allowed entrance into that experience. Obviously, he was meant to be seated with that experience as well as
yeah.
your, I don't, he wasn't, was he wasn't your co-pilot, he was a passenger with you,
Oh no, he was a passenger co-pilot.
passenger co-pilot. So you were co-pilots together in that journey, in that experience. And to me, when I hear stories like this, there's no accident that he was there too. In whatever ways this came, you know, this became a living energy in his awareness and his life.
Hmm.
And now it's seated somehow in our consciousness. That's how energy moves,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad to relate this. This is the first time I've actually told this story. Believe it or not, I've been saying someone's. I got to get this out to somebody because this is was seeing this, and I apologize again for this rudimentary drawing, but to give you an idea, you really can draw something like this unless you're, you know, really talented artist, because it was so multidimensional with the different spires and columns and how they were geographically or geometrically laid out with the spirals and the colors and the white, intense white with the blue tints to it. It was just amazing.
Yeah. Well, I also get the sense of, in a way, I don't know if you heard anything in there or if it was just completely still, but it reminds me of what I would conceive of as a sound chamber, right?
Yeah, it was very still in there. Very,
Yes.
very calm, very calm. And you wouldn't think that flying through those type of, they call cumulus clouds. Normally, those they accumulate, and the air is always rising. So it's flying through a cumulus cloud is not a pleasant experience. But this calm
It
as
feels
play.
like an otherworldly portal to
It
me.
was, yeah, definitely another worldly portal, and that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were gifted to fly through there.
You were. You were. And as I often say, is admission is by vibration. And something about the two, you know, both of your vibrations was meant to have that experience and be seated with that. So you can be a messenger of that here in 2021, telling us this
Mhm.
story that will
Yeah,
travel on, right? It will travel on.
yeah. It was that we have a lot of friends in the different dimensions who work with the elemental kingdom, you know, air spirits, water spirits, earth, fire. Uh, and the air spirits are quite majestic and quite powerful. I have seen them turn clouds around, high overcast clouds, and they just said, "Watch this." And within a minute, they made the outline of an eagle, a bird flying at cirrus altitude, which is about 30, 40,000 feet. They got those clouds and made it big, beautiful. And of course, I didn't have my camera with me, and I was going to run inside and get it, but I knew what happened. By the time I got out, it would be gone. So they
Right.
are quite majestic, beautiful beings.
That's
I can go on with other stories about them, about hurricanes, communicating with the spirit of the hurricane. There's air spirits within the hurricane. Um,
it's amazing. There's we could even call it a form of cloud art, right?
mhm. Yeah.
There is an artistry to it, and I think we pay attention to that maybe as children, and
Mhm.
now of course in this day and age we have all of our devices and kids are more looking here instead of looking out in a lot of
Exactly.
ways. But I remember as a kid, if I was laying in a field or on a beach and you would just see the clouds, we spent more time doing those things. And maybe we need to do a little bit more of that, because
Yeah.
there's messages in the clouds for
Mhm.
us. If
There's a gifted psychic who worked with the elemental kingdom and with angels, Jeffrey Hudson, Jeffrey with a G. He lived in the UK in the early part of the 20th, early to mid part of the 20th century. And he had an experience in a thunderstorm that is just amazing. Uh, and where he just explains what he saw inside of a violent thunderstorm on the psychic level, where the actual lightning bolts and explosions of thunder were caused by these dark beings who were kind of like getting the negativity of the planet or at that time and releasing it, and with the release and explosion, these things would come down like giant bats screaming and explode with the lightning. And it was like hell breaking loose. But he said in the middle of all of this and in total control of it was this pure being of radiant, brilliant white light who was keeping it all in check and orchestrating it. An amazing story, an amazing story.
Amazing story.
And that is what the elemental spirit world of the air spirits is kind of like all about. They move weather patterns around to help dissipate energy, not only heat energy, but the negativity that's created by human consciousness and builds up. And they said, whoops, time to clear this stuff. And wacko, they come up with this type of clearing storm, I would say. And hurricanes at times are like that. Yeah.
And you think about how many people don't connect a lot of dots in their lives, right? That there's any consciousness behind any events in our lives. A lot of people are living in a realm of consciousness where those dots don't connect. There's no awareness of that. But when you do start to live and you do start connecting with spirit, with source, with the elemental realms, and we understand this universe is a living, energetic universe. It's a conscious living universe. There are sort of messages in the clouds. There are these incredible elemental beings who perform these clearings, these angelic beings that strike a balance in the duality of this world, where you have the thundering clouds of negativity and lightning bolts and all of that, that bring, are designed in some ways to bring fear into this realm. There's
as well
also,
as balance. You talk about you've heard of the Schumann resonant frequency. It's
yes,
7.8 hertz electrical. And that's all formed by the constant lightning bolts throughout the world. I forget what the numbers are, 100 lightning flashes every second throughout the planet, all over the world, that going on at different places, obviously, but there's thunderstorms and constantly blasting lightning. And that sets up that electrical charge around the planet at 7.8 hertz. Which is a significant number, because in your brain, that is the threshold between the alpha brainwave frequency and the theta brainwave frequency, from pure bliss and conscious ecstatic bliss to unconscious imagery. It's right at the same frequency as the Schumann radio frequency. So there's this harmony going on around the planet that keeps us just noggin working.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and offer us these choices in the timeline we want to be experiencing also, which is something I always feel is that at some level, and I would say at soul level, you and your co-pilot had this experience because at some level you said yes. At some level you said yes to having that. Somebody else might get invitations to an experience like this, but their vibration and their consciousness isn't ready for it, so they don't even see. They wouldn't see a castle in the clouds like something like this, right? Which is why I think your story is fairly unique. Not everybody's open to having these experiences.
Yeah, and the uniqueness is there was a 50-year gap before I became awake into what's happening. So.
Some of those seeds take a little while to bloom, to grow.
Oh, yeah, it took quite a while. Right. A lot of fertilizer.
Yeah, and yet there's no accident in the timing. Somehow all of those years in between this experience and it really blooming in your consciousness to be able to share this at this level today, there's a lot of journeying you've done. You've done a lot of work, a lot of vibrational work, a lot of clearing work on yourself and the planet, and
Mhm.
you're now ready to be a teacher and a storyteller and a sharer, a messenger of this mystical experience. This was a mystical experience.
Yes, yes, definitely. And with that adventure or journey, I want to go to the next story.
Yes.
So this next segment happened around 2011 and 12 timeframe. I was working with a healing group in the Midwest, and we had one woman who was our channeler. The profound energies coming through to her about going to Scotland. That there was Scotland has a lot of rich spiritual energy from the Templar Knights, and going even before that, where they kind of held the nobility and sovereignty of the human soul and the human spirit. And there was a mission that needed to be done there. And I will say briefly, it's the mission was, and I'm going to summarize it, is about 500 to 600 years ago. There was a pretty bad blight and epidemic that ran through that central part of Scotland, and a bunch of children had died, about a dozen of them, 10 to 12 of them, along with a lot of adults who lived around there. Now, because of the turmoil too that had shifted and was going on in Scotland, now this had to be like 700 or 800 years ago. These souls could not cross over. They were kind of like trapped in some sort of tertiary zone, and there was a lot of dark negativity around there that was holding them back. So they were stranded, these children. And one of the ladies, we found out later, her name was Mary, opted to stay back to protect the children, even though she could have crossed over. So our mission was to go over and liberate them. That's quite a journey, but that's what we do, so off we went. The predecessor to that, however, to get us broken into the energy of Scotland and to kind of prove ourselves, we worked with a higher entity called Merlin. Now, let me interject right here. This is not the Merlin of the King Arthur realm. Okay, was a fictitious, I would think, name was based on the real Merlin who lived in Scotland around 500, 600 AD, 6th or 5th century AD, who was a magician, a shaman is a better name for him. And he had done a lot of good work there and converted to Christianity, by the way. And to start with to get our energies working in that type with him in that mode, we had to find the altar stone that he was christened on. Now, even though he was a grown man, he knelt before an altar, and that was in central part of Scotland. So that was the start of the journey. We landed in Edinburgh, and we went to Rosslyn Chapel just to get tuned in and visit there, and then we were going to travel to find the altar stone, and then from there we would get a hint on where we had to go to find where these children were locked. Okay. Oh. They were the place we had. Our final destination was a sacred stone that Merlin did a lot of his work when he was a shaman, that he prayed on and what have you. And that was an energy stone that we had to find to help these children pass over, as well as doing our own spiritual clearing that we normally do to help. Is that clear?
Very clear.
Okay, so we'll start off with this Scotland spiritual adventure. So the first place we went to was Rosslyn Chapel. This gets fame back to the Templar ages and what have you. And it's in the town of Rosslyn, and there's a Rosslyn Castle is right behind that, which is kind of like been pretty much torn down during the Civil War that went on in England. There are a lot of beautiful places and names here that elude me at this time, so I apologize for anyone from Scotland watching this if I leave things out. We went to Scotland and into Rosslyn Chapel, and that's where we got together. And right out of the gate, we were being guided because we got there like at 9 or 10 in the morning, and we had hotel reservations in the town of Rosslyn. Now, and as everybody else knows, hotels open up at 3 in the afternoon, right? that's when they let everybody in. So we get there at 9 o'clock in the morning. What the heck are we going to do? So we all have our bags. So we go to the hotel, which is an old-fashioned type of hotel, very clean, very nice. And we just so we could leave our bag there. So we walk in, this very nice ladies at the young ladies at the counter and said, "Oh, you're the Americans. Oh, your rooms are ready now." Really? And why don't you leave your bags here, because we're just serving breakfast and we have eggs and sausage and all these biscuits, and it's all yours. Go in there. And I go, what a welcome, you know. So we just stuffed ourselves like you wouldn't believe. Put our bags up, changed, and then took a tour of the chapel, which was maybe a quarter of a mile walk away.
Okay.
So I just have one shot here of this beautiful interior of the chapel. Some of the carvings here are just unique. It's just, you can see these columns and these spires, columns, clouds, and the classical clouds. Just dramatic. We did our 4 direction ceremony here just to help get tuned in and to bring in the light to help us in our mission. And although you can't see it on this particular shot, one of the partial evidence that the Templars and the Knights were in the New World long before Columbus. This chapel was built in, I think, 1450, thereabouts. Again, pardon my aloof way of explaining this stuff. And you can't see it here, but in a lot of the artwork up around here and higher up, there's corn. Was all made in part of the decorations and all this artwork. Now, corn was only grown in the New World. Now, if this went up in 1440, 1450, what do they know about corn if Columbus didn't discover the America in 1492? So the legend is the Templars were there long before Columbus, and they had traveled all the way to Minnesota. And there's some evidence about that they had discovered it and worked with seen Native Americans. That's where they knew where the corn came from. Side note, back to the story. So we were in here, and now we went down. One of the ladies with us, there was 2 ladies and me and Al, another Al, and Deb and Linda. Deb and Linda were the psychics. They were just with the radar, you know, picking stuff up left and right. And Al and I were the grunts, you know, we just kind of make things happen, except for me and my dowsing, you know.
Well, that's like the air element and the earth. You know, you guys were bringing the structure and the warrior energy in your own ways. And yeah, they were connected.
It was a real good balance. And,
yeah.
You know, Al was the kind of, he was also a pilot, by the way, fighter pilot in the Air Force. So he had this way about him of organizing things. I was more or less the bloodhound with the dowsing rods, and the 2 ladies with the radar, you know, just finding things. So they're saying, we got to go downstairs in the crypt. There's a crypt below this where you could go downstairs. So we go downstairs to the crypt, which is over here.
Wow.
And this is really a place loaded with symbology. And off to the side here, you can't see it. There's a storage room where they keep the mops and buckets, and that the energy out in that room was just out of the world. I mean, the dowsing rods just went like that, you know, and we could feel it inside the storage room. That nobody else could feel it, but you know, us anyway. So we walk out, and the ladies are saying there's a message in here for us. There is a message somewhere in here where we're supposed to go. Okay, well, we know we're supposed to go to find Maryland's altar, but the ultimate place to find the stone where we had to do the clearing, it was in here. And I look on the wall, it was either right here or right over there in this area. Don't remember, this is 10 or 11 years ago. And the photographs I took back then were on my flip phone. You know,
yes.
That flip phone was the cat's meow back then. So, when I translated a lot of that to my first iPhone 4, which was 3 iPhones ago, a lot of it was lost. So that's why I'm doing, by the way, I'm doing all of these taken from the internet This came from the Rosslyn Chapel website.
Okay.
And again, very lightly inscribed right here on the wall was a figure that looked like this.
Wow.
And one of the ladies says, "That's it. That's what we need to look for." I go, "Well, what is it? You know, it's just left brain, right brain. This is it. Left brain." So anyway,
That happens to the
this
best
is
of
what
us.
we found later on when we actually found where we had to go, and I'll allude back to what this meant. But it was almost like somebody had time travel, or they knew we were coming, and they had sketched this on the wall. And I had experiences before when I worked in Central America to do clearings where people were time traveling to give us hints or seeing us there, etc. Long story, but anyway, this was one of the hints that was given to us that later on helped us find where we had to go. So,
Wow.
all right, so
That
now,
journey with your left brain, right brain, I just wanted to just a moment just to say that happens to all of us. You know, the left brain's like, there's nothing here. There's nothing to see. You
yeah,
know, why are
on.
you,
Nothing's here.
nothing's here. And
Yeah.
then it's the right brain. It's kind of the divine feminine aspects of us that know how to listen at this higher level and recognize the significance of what you're being given.
Right.
It's powerful.
And this would be a predominant theme throughout the story. So Al and I driving in the front, the left brain, and the ladies in the back saying, "No, no, wait, stop here." No, this ain't the place. So yeah, we had to learn our lesson. But all right, next one. So now we looking for Merlin's altar stone, which is in the central part of Scotland, not far from the town of Peebles, which is kind of unique because in Peebles, Ohio, is where Serpent Mound is in famous Neolithic, or supposedly Neolithic, but high energetic Native American site of a serpent. It's 1,100 feet long, carved serpent, beautiful.
Wow.
This is Peebles, Scotland. So we got some information here to go to the town of Stobo, which is not far from Peebles, to start our journey. So this is Stobo Kirk. Now, Kirk, Kirk, means church in Scottish. Okay.
Wow.
So it kind of makes you wonder about Gene Roddenberry when he wrote Star Trek, Captain Kirk.
Oh, wow.
Kirk. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Right?
So, yeah. Anyway, this is an old church. And the reason why we stopped here first, because A, it was on the way, B, we were told to stop there. But it was also had pictures of Merlin being baptized. Now, this is St. Kentigern, Catholic monk who baptized Merlin. Somewhere in here is the altar stone. And that was only a mile or two from where we eventually found it.
Wow.
Okay, now, I had gotten directions at that time on the internet on where to find the altar stone. Okay, so which we eventually did find, but it wasn't far. It was just like 2 miles down the road, according to the thing. Make the second right and go up a mile. It's on and you'll find it. Okay, so the weather here was horrible. It was raining out. It was windy. It was cold, and so we go driving down the road, and I got I'm in the right seat. Al's driving. Ladies are in the back, and it says second right. So we go by this one right turn. You can see it coming up, and all of a sudden this energy comes over me. Turn now. This is where you have to turn. And this is the first right. It's not the second right. So no, just keep going. Even though it's like pounding me, and now turn now. This is the highest spirit. No, I know it's not written that. One more. So we go down, and there ain't no second right. We go over a bridge, and now we're in another town. I go,
it was back there. It was back there, right?
Yeah. So that's eventually the stone. But let me go back. We go back up, and now we have to make a left. What we found it. Now we're going up this muddy farm road that's only a lane wide, lane and a half at the most, and the wind is howling. and it's raining out, and we're driving along, putting along in a little rent-a-car. It was a Volkswagen or something or other, I don't remember. And we all of a sudden we crest this little hill, and we're driving straight, and the clouds stop. Everything opens up, and the sun is shining. Now, hint, it's right here. But no, according to the map, we have to go, so it just, we drove right past it. And then as soon as we went past it, clouds closed, rain started pouring down again. And we're almost stuck in the mud now, about another half a mile down the road, and there's a car coming the other way. And we managed to get neck to neck and open the window. Now, let's see. Yeah, we're on opposite sides because everything in the UK is different. So,
right.
A farmer who lived up the road, we asked him where the altar stone is, even if he knew of such a thing. He said, "Oh yeah, it's right down the road, about a half a mile. You must have passed it coming up here." So he turned around and went back and to the spot where the sun came out, and there it was on our side over there. So, and that's what it looks like. Now, my photographs were lost, so I had to get this again online. And there's a whole Merlin's Trail if you want to Google that, Merlin's Trail, and it has the whole thing with it, about Merlin and where he was baptized, and also where he was finally executed too. I guess rubbed people the wrong way because he had converted to Christianity. But this is another shot of the altar stone. They even have a plaque here now. And it was right across from a farm that was the Altar Stone Farm with a big sign, Altar Stone Farm. Yeah. So we're starting to learn.
This is such a message and a lesson for all of us, because we all know what you're describing of like, I know better, thanks, but I'll take it from here because I know what I'm doing. And only when you have these experiences and you have to, do it your way and go up in all the turnarounds, you finally start to listen the first time.
Yeah. So we saw this, and okay, we learned, we're starting to tune in. Okay, we're not going to be the ugly Americans anymore. We're really going to listen to energy. So we thought. So we had to now drive through the countryside to get. We're going to establish ourselves for about 4 days on the west coast of Scotland, in a town, nice city called Ayr, Ayr. And that's what now the second journey is all about, which is where we're going to find where this stone is so we can liberate these children and the woman who's guarding them.
Right.
Okay. So now finding the portal. Right. I'm going to go stop sharing screen because here we go. So we got this really nice B&B in Ayr, and right not far from the water. It's Irish Sea, I believe, is over there. And I'm sorry if I got that wrong, but we walked around a lot just to get accustomed to the area, and we started driving around. Some of the ladies had seen a vision of where the stone is, and it's in a farmhouse. And they thought they saw a for sale sign. So now we had to find a farm that was for sale in Scotland. You know how many farms are for sale in Scotland? So, so we decided to go to a real estate agent, and that didn't pan out too good. So I remember, hey, I'm a map dowser. Why don't I just map dowse on where it is? So we go back to the hotel, and we got into one of the rooms had 2 beds. So we broke up into teams. It was me and Deb and Al and Linda, who eventually got married, by the way.
Oh, wow.
And Al and Linda had one map, and we had the other map. Deb and I had the other map. And I gave them a flash course on map dowsing. Pretty simple, One of you holds the pendulum. We all have pendulums, and the other one works with the straight edge going up the map. And whenever this pendulum spins real fast, you stop, draw a line. Then you go horizontally or vertically across. And whenever the pendulum spins, draw a line. And then where the 2 lines cross, that's where you want to go. I mean, it's dowsing 101. Okay. So we got in different sides of the room, and whispering so we wouldn't influence each other.
Oh, wow.
So I worked the pendulum, and Deb did the map, and I forget how Al and Linda worked it out. And we did it. We both came up with a spot independently, and we didn't check. We said, "Okay, are you ready?" And we got our each map, and we laid them next to each other, and they were on perfectly to within a quarter of an inch of each other. That's where we had to go. Okay, so it's amazing.
It
So
is amazing.
off we go the next morning. We got this made. So we're driving down the road. We're heading towards Stewarton now. It's a drive between Air and Stewarton, because we have a tendency to think it's out that way. Because when we did the map, that's the next town was Stewarton, the dowsing on the map. So we're on our way to Stewarton, and we're about 3 miles away, just a couple of minutes, and the ladies in the back seat scream out, "There it is! There it is! That's it!" So the guys in the front, we're much more smarter. It can't be it. We've been planning for this all this time, and we're going to find it in 10 minutes. No, it's got to be for me. So again, even though that's where the map doused, we just couldn't buy into that. The left brain said, "You got to be crazy. We got to plan this thing. We have to do more trip and that, and surveys, and take pictures, and fly helicopters and satellite. Just out of control." So we spent the next 3 days going crazy, not finding anything, except downtown Stewarton, which had a great coffee shop, by the way. They really liked us because we were heavy tippers. They were nice people, so good
So
stuff.
you're good customers. Yeah.
Yeah. Repeat. So we finally figured out, now we should go back there. Maybe that's it. God bless the women. They were so patient. So we go back there, and nobody's home. But my dowsing rod, I take out the dowsing rods. Is this the spot? Before I could even ask it, they cross like, "This is it. You got it, dummies." So I left a note, and I said, "We'll come back tomorrow." I said, "We're from the U.S. We're the geometers. We're studying ley lines, and there's a big one that runs right through your backyard. Can we come?" I wouldn't want to go back because the dowsing rods were pointing to where it was. I came back the next day, and the lady was there, was very gracious, said, "Yes, so I got your note. By all means, if you need to go back there, go ahead." And
Nice.
I said, my friends come with me? And they said, yes. So we had rule of the play. Now it's a farm, but the backyard was fenced in. There was these big trees, of which I will show you next. Let me share screen. Let me get back into it. Now, back beyond here is this farm that goes on forever. It's maybe 100 acres. And it's been raining out again. It seems to rain all the time in Scotland. And there was mud all over the place.
Wow.
And the woman said, "Make sure you put your boots on because it's pretty bad back there." But I just knew instinctively it wasn't out there. It was in their little garden area behind this back of the house, which was grassed in and not muddy. Okay.
Just follow the blessings. Follow the blessings.
Follow the
right?
blessings, follow the dowsing rods. The map dowsing got us to here, besides this. And but lesson number 65,400 on the strip. When we were doing the channeling back in the U.S. And in the Midwest, and Tennessee is where most of them were, and a few of us were on the East Coast. We were getting the channeling direct from high dimensions, explaining how the rock looked like. It was 3 feet high and it was like this. Now, there ain't no 3 foot high rock back here. Then it came to me that they're looking at the rock as it was 1,500 years ago.
Whoa.
Things have changed since then, the weathering, erosion, ground coming up, and all that. So now we finally find the rock, and that's it right there. That's what's sticking up out of the ground after all of this. But, the dowsing rod's crossed, the pendulum is spinning around like a helicopter blade. We found it, and that's my shoes or Al's shoes, I don't know. But anyway, so we formed this ring around it, and we did the 4 directions, north, south, east, west, using a Native American technique to open up the portal, to liberate the children, and Mary was her name, to bring them into higher dimension. This is what we're here for. We found the stone, let's do our job. So we did the 4 portals, and that was it. And it felt good, but there was no gee whiz about it. There was no like rockets and anything else. But we had done our job. So we went back and thanked the woman, saying, we found it. It's here. Thank you very much. And she was very gracious. Anytime, come on back. And Lisa Astley, Sukasa,
Wow.
in the Scottish format. So, and so we get back in the car, and it was almost kind of anticlimactic. I said, well, now what? So let's go back to Stewarton. One of the gals saying, left turn, go back to Stewarton. So we're driving back, and it's only 4 minutes drive back to Stewarton. And just as we come into town, there's this church, Church of the Church of Scotland, this real old church. And I get this compulsion too. We got to stop here. We got to stop. And park the car, and we walk around the back. We're kind of walking, and the energy is starting to build. And we walk around the back of the church, and which is right over here. We came out over here, and whammo, the feeling of joy and elation was stupendous. Wow. Apparently, this is where they were. Even though they were the stone, the energy of the stone was protecting them and keeping them safe, but they couldn't cross over. They were probably physically in this location, which was only 2 or 3 miles away. Of course, in a high dimension, that probably don't mean that much. So all 4 of us stood right over here, right where those bushes. Now, these are photos I took from Google Maps, zoomed in on Google Earth and took photos. These are recent photos. These are not my flip phone stuff, okay? And this came from Google Earth, and the person who did it gets references, Port Morlock over here. So anyway, the feeling of joy, of elation, apparently and I've experienced this before, when an entity crosses over, they go up in a vortex, and the joy is kind of like sparkles that comes down. If you can see this like spiraling up into the light, sparkling. You got a dozen children going up along with Mary going up. There's this double spiral vortex, and the feeling is just pure joy, just elation. I mean, we couldn't even move. It was so great, and just stood there for like 5 minutes, just soaking up this energy, which again is a trap. You got to be careful of that, because you don't want to soak up too much. You get too attached to it, because they may come back. Maybe you pull them back down again, because they're going up and you're down here, and you
let them go. Just let them go.
Let them go. Let them go. Okay, felt good. Great. Let's go get a cup of coffee. And that was the end of our Scotland trip right there. After that, the next day we made it back drove back to Edinburgh, got on our planes and flew back. We saw each other once or twice since then.
Wow.
We worked on a major clearing for World War II. There was a major clearing that had to be done in the Pacific for Japanese soldiers and airmen, as well as Americans. And we worked together on that subsequent to this.
You guys are like the deep unsung heroes. There's many kinds of warriors, right?
Yeah.
On the planet at this time. And there's a lot of, it seems quiet work, but it's exponential. It's the ripple effect of the kind of work that you guys do when you do these clearings and you liberate these souls that are trapped in negative energy or in these in between dimension worlds, that's holding us, like your first story, underneath those clouds, underneath that band of clouds and those storms.
Mm-hmm.
As you clear these things, it raises all of us. And I just want to bring attention to that, because it's not a lot of people talk this way. You have to think about, just anyone in our audience has to think about, you guys like paid your way. You had to buy your plane ticket. You have to listen, all the prep work before, all the listening before, going over there, having things mapped out as best you could, the listening that you do, the expense of it all, but also the investment of your time and your skills and all of that. It's profound work you're doing for the planet and for us all.
Spirit has a way of paying you back. And I think that the one I explained last session about clearing the ley lines, the nuclear ley lines, as well as the World War II Japanese sailors, soldiers, and airmen, as well as U.S. soldiers and airmen and sailors. That took months months of research and conference calls and before we actually did the actual ceremonies to clear them over.
Right. This is deep spiritual work, and a lot of people, this is also, you found meaning in this. You've listened to this calling that you have, and others answer that call too. It's how you connect with each other to do this kind of work. And
Yeah,
but a lot of us in our world today, we're so, again, we have the distractions of this 3D world that keep us, chugging away, paying taxes, working hard, all these things. But there's also this other, whole world of consciousness and lived human experience when we become beings who serve the light, when we become beings of service. And this is a
exactly.
huge service that brings the meaning that many people are craving. When you look at the level of addiction or the level of trauma or depression or mental health issues, a lot of times it's because people, we've forgotten our way, we've forgotten how to listen. And even though you jokingly share about what it's like with the left brain, the left brain, the right brain, and the conversation and the two wolves that wrestle in our heads, even inside our own selves, there's a time that we become more open to listen and learn. And sometimes it is by trial and error, and
Yeah,
and missing the turn and not listening to our inner guidance, following the map that we are sure is correct. you
yeah,
know
yeah.
it's a spiritual journey to learn how to listen.
Yeah.
And I just want to bring it back to it. There are many people who are trying to connect with purpose, or know that there's something more for them to do, but they don't know what it is. Sometimes the first step in that is learning how to listen to more of
Mhm.
the spiritual language and the spiritual guidance, because somewhere in your journey, Joseph, you were in a very 3D job. You were an enlisted man at one point, right? And then
Yeah,
you
and
also.
I was in corporate America for 30 years when I got out, service and
Mhm.
corporate management and hard hitting Fortune 500 company. And,
Right,
no,
that whole world. And it's
yeah,
amazing you had that consciousness, but then something was always, because of probably the castle in the clouds, and maybe even before that, that's maybe another podcast for another day, where you're having spiritual experiences before you even got up in the clouds and have had some of those experiences. But at some level, you start to orient your multi-dimensional time space vehicle to listen to the messages that are coming, and allowing the 3D self that was in the corporate world and all that strategy and that kind of warrioring. And then you also allow the spiritual warrioring inside, and you start to live a bigger purpose
yes,
in many
yeah.
ways,
And,
even though it's the more quiet purpose. Not everybody, that wasn't necessarily that I know, nobody did a documentary or something, that you hear the story. This is a version of a documentary of your
yeah,
journey, just. but
yeah,
but even a lot of times, some of our work is unsung, is quiet, committed, deeply meaningful, soul enriching, powerful, and profound work, and connecting with the elemental realms and the spiritual realms and the higher dimensional realms. And you might not have an audience of millions of people, and yet that profoundly impacted those souls that you helped cross over. And it also impacts us in this podcast, feeling the energy and the gratitude for what you facilitated, right? What you transmuted and what you facilitated. And I think more and more, as a human collective consciousness, we're in this renaissance of consciousness now. We still seem like the outliers talking about all the stuff we're talking about today,
mhm,
right?
yeah,
And yet we're helping that renaissance, which to me is that rising of consciousness and accessing more of who we really are. And there are many souls. Even, I think you mentioned Merlin, who sounds like he met an unfortunate end, because living this way, living committed to your faith and this inner guidance system, has in many lifetimes not synced up with the rules and the oppression of the day,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And
It's, you got to change hats when you get into the spiritual realm of working. Remember the old Wild West movies, when you walked into the saloon, you had to hang your guns up. Well, when you walk in to do this work, you got to hang up your ego. It requires a lot of humility, and can't look for reward either. Like, look, God, I did this. I helped these souls cross over. Now, can I have my Ferrari, please? You don't, that's not the way it is. You're of constant service. And at times you lose that. I lose it, you know, I'm going to get stuck in the illusion, in the whirlwind of life. And got to walk out of the swamp. I walk back into the swamp again, you know, and you got to get out, you know. And
Right.
what's your recovery time? How long do you stay in the swamp and feel sorry for yourself?
Right.
An hour, a day, a week, a month, you know. What's your recovery time? You got to recover. Deep breath, slow breathing, and ask for guidance, soul to come in to get you out of here, you know.
That's right. That's right. The spiritual warrior or the seeker knows how to, we get pulled into the swamp, but we are aware that there's other choices we can make to get us back
Right.
centered.
That's important, that
Yeah.
awareness, and to follow up on the awareness.
Yeah.
Aware, yes, and now what I'm going to do about it. Yeah.
Right.
Cool. And everybody in their normal day, you're just sending light, just being a good spiritual person as best you can, all aids in the raising of the evolution of the planet. So you don't have to be out like we do to help. It's not for everybody. And I'll tell you in the next slide, boy, it ain't for anybody.
Right.
But
Yeah.
you can help out just by being a good person, spiritually gifted, meditating, sending out light and love, just being a loving, happy, joyous person the best you can. That's all good background music and energy that we all can feel.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah, we're all experiencing what we're all doing, whether we're conscious of that or not. And
Yeah.
so when you make a choice to live your life as joyfully as you can and be as good a person as you can and help others as much as you can in your own way,
Yeah.
we are creating more of that music versus discord. And
Yeah. It's like a symphony orchestra, you know, what, 75, 70 different instruments, players. And sometimes you have a violin doing a solo, and other times it's the French horn, you know, and you put it all together and you have this beautiful symphony.
right.
You
That's
have soloists and you have the band, and it all works. It all works.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, onward. The next one. All right, now this is back in US of A, in central North Carolina, Civil War death camp. All right, so I got wind of this indirectly, reading a travel brochure, by the way, because you're not going to find much written about this at all, because it's kind of like not a good story. But there is a Civil War death camp in, prisoner of war camp in central North Carolina that was started in 1864, and it lasted for a year. And it's estimated, the unofficial count was about almost 12,000 Union soldiers died there from disease and starvation. That has been readjusted. When we went out there and I went out there a few times, spoke to the site managers as part of the National Cemetery. He said, well, they overestimated. It was really 6,000 who died. 6,000 died in a year? That comes out to what? 50 a day? That's a lot of people dying, you know? It's like 2 or 3 an hour for a year straight. You know, where did they put all the bodies? So I decided to go out there with another light worker. And Mark and I did a couple of healings on our own. We were younger then, so we went by motorcycle. We both had motorcycles. So instead of calling ourselves Hell's Angels, we were Heaven's Devils. But we would go to these sites and do clearings. It was great, having a lot of fun on our motorcycles, pulling up there. Tough guy, you know. And we went out to this one place here, and what we saw beginning is this. You see that? That's a grave marker. And you kind of get an idea of the spans of this place, but you see all of that back there?
Yes.
Okay, and all of these, unknown U.S. soldier, unknown U.S. soldier, unknown U.S. soldier, unknown U.S. soldier.
Wow. Chills. I'm having just chills through my whole body.
So it was a horrible place. Soldiers who were captured were brought there. There's hardly any food. They try to maintain order because of the military structure. They maintained some order, but they were not treated well. They were not mistreated. They just weren't treated at all. If they escaped, they were run down and killed, okay, from the local militia and what have you, while the war was raging up in Virginia and in Georgia. All right. So there was the famous in Georgia, the Anderson death camps, the prisoner of war camp. And then the little known one is this one in North Carolina that you don't read about. Okay, I mean, you can read about it, but you really got to dig. Matter of fact, if you go to North Carolina Museum of History, there's a little paragraph about this prisoner of war camp where the prisoners, in order to kill time, would fashion pins and needles out of bones. They didn't tell you how many died doing that. So anyway, we got here in Mark and I, and we started doing our clearing. And immediately as we went into this, the energy of depression, of sorrow, of loneliness, of
Despair.
missing their families. A lot of these men had wives and children that they missed tremendously. The feeling of sorrow, of missing and their loved ones was so intense, so heavy. While we're doing our work, we had to stop. We actually sat down and cried. We bawled like babies. We just could not handle the grief that these men went through. The despair was unbelievable. We did the best we could. I think we stood there for about a half hour, sending in the light, sending in love. And finally, it got to be such an emotional drain. Mark called his wife, Linnea, who said, I'll take it from here. This is when I learned when we go to do stuff like this, you always need a backup. You need somebody behind you in case this gets too much for you. You got calling the Marines, you know? And so she said, I got it from here. You guys get out of there. I can handle it now. She works with hierarchy quite a bit. So I'm using this in comparison of the one prior to this, the adventure I showed you about releasing those 12 children and the joyous feeling of them ascending, to this over here where we couldn't even get through the pain and the emotion of these 6,000 men, approximately 6,000. Let me go back and I'll show you how they figure that out. You see this particular tombstone here, there's 4 of them. And this is a big open field. It's really not open. This is a pit where they threw all the dead bodies. Oh. So when the war was over, I think it was General Sherman got wind of this and sent a cavalry regiment to find out what was going on. When they got there, this was in mid-1865, they were so horrified by what they saw that they burned down the whole city. I mean, they just destroyed everything to clear up the energy, the smell. And then they, subsequent to that, what the prison guards would do when some soldier died, they would throw the body in these pits. So they undug one of the pits and counted 3,000 bodies in one pit. So from there, this is dirty, hard work. And this happened in 1867, 1868, their time frame. They figured there were 3 of these pits, or 4 of these pits, 4 times 3, 12,000 people. They just did that speculation. And that's what the monuments say. But subsequent research using ground radar got it to about 6,000, 5,000 to 6,000. That's still a lot of people. Andersonville was 10,000. Died from malnutrition, disease, and what have you. So the comparison here is the pain and agony experienced here as opposed to the joy. So again, this is not a job for the faint of heart by any means.
No, you are called. People who do this work are generally called, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely. Just like people who do acupuncture, astrology, and other types of energy work, energy clearing and healing, whatever it may be, right. Reiki, Blvd, and whatever the energy form is, it's all their calling. So this was my calling, as well as many others who I work with. Good people. So.
Yeah, I can feel that too.
I don't know if you can feel the energy coming out of this. The depressive sorrow was pretty intense. So you can imagine what I will tell you now. There is a major effort going on in Germany to clear up the death camps there. Mother Mira is there working on that. That's how heavy the energy is there. Yeah. And this is 6,000, imagine 6 million. The scar on the planet is
scar on the planet.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's, it's all over Siberia, China, throughout history, all over the world, this massacres going on left,
Right.
going back in the history, Atlantis and when, just,
And what I feel when you speak, when I connect with you in this way, and I know the deep work that you and your teams have done and continue to do,
mhm,
is that these events aren't once and done necessarily, because the energy lives on, the grief and the despondency and the despair and all those low frequency energies. If there weren't warriors like you on the planet working with the higher realms of spirit to clear, just like you had to look for that opening in the clouds again,
mhm,
the castle in the clouds, it's like, there's these portals that people have to be able to find to let these people up and through, right? Let them
yeah,
access this energy and to let them go through. And there are things that you are doing obviously in present day that's clearing souls who've been trapped for, you know, it's their own version of hell where they're trapped in between worlds and they can't move on.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it
Oh,
is helping that symphony of the planet to sing more freely and clearly and breathe better, and all the toxicity that we allow in our lives, whether it's the food we eat that might not be the best choices for us to support our mind, body, spirit, body, our
mhm,
temples. It all these things are interconnected.
yeah,
The things we eat, the air we breathe, the way we treat the waters, the way we treat the earth, the way we treat each other. It's also because these bands of energy, of these negative energy, of a lot of these wars and things, I'm just so grateful that there are people like you and your teams who do go in and do these clearings to facilitate this movement of energy so we don't have the stagnancy of heaviness,
yeah.
right?
The analogy I'm getting while you're saying this is, take a person starting off in childhood. They play soccer, and then boom, they break an ankle or a boom. Then
Right.
they grow up later on, they fall off their bicycle, and they got an elbow. And then all through life, playing tennis, they fall over. Ah, now my other elbow. And now you walk around with all these old wounds, even though that you're almost clear. Every once in a while, this pains, this, oh my gosh, I can't, this hurts from the 40 years ago. So, but you got to go. That's what we do. We go in and clear things. We do that type of work. While other light energy people are doing other type of work. I'm not focusing on us, but that's kind of
Right. But it is
clearing that ancient stuff that's blockages of energies that,
yes.
as a broken ankle would be blocking energy to a certain degree 30 years later. You would
Yeah.
still feel pain when it rains out or something.
Well, and it's kind of like a long after the fact of these events, it's kind of an etheric surgery in a way. If you think
Mm,
about it in the metaphor of healing, there is this, we may have mended the bones or stitched the skin together or whatever it is, the injuries that we have, but there's this etheric mending. There's this etheric healing, and those wounds are the ones that keep creating at some other lower vibrational level that most can't even detect, but you can see
mm,
the evidence of it in our world. You
yeah.
can see the heaviness, you can see the wounds, you can see it in the faces of people who are starving, who aren't getting what they need, right? And all the things, all the traumas that we live in our world today as a modern day collective, right? We are being summoned to, if we are called, listen to that call. This is going to be in this renaissance, I really feel this renaissance of consciousness, this renewal of faith and spirituality, and this seeking and questing God inside us and doing the work of the living light.
Hmm.
We are being called to do our part. Each one of us has a talent. I don't have the talent that you do, but obviously you're called to do that work, and you're effective in that work because it's your calling. It's part of your path and purpose. I do it in a different way, right? But there are many more of us who are asleep to this powerful purpose that we have in participating energetically in the healing and the raising of this planet and the healing and raising of our consciousness. They're coming online more and more.
Yeah.
We're being called, we're hearing the call. And
Yeah.
I'm just so grateful to you for how long you've been participating. And the first step is being willing to be a participant in your own hero's journey. However, anybody languages that, your journey of spiritual seeking, the questing, the listening, you could have heard those callings and just said, ah, what is that static, and
Yeah.
banished it and pushed it away. And I'm sure you and I have done that maybe in other lifetimes. But in this
Yeah, I know.
lifetime,
Yeah.
in this
I'll take
lifetime,
a
we
lot of sense in other lifetimes,
right?
Yeah.
And in this lifetime, we want to turn the dial and get a clearer, hear those messages clearer. We actually know that this
Exactly.
one is really important to listen, and we're
Yeah.
not pushing it away this time.
Yeah. And you got to keep focusing. And I'm also a ham radio operator. So a lot of times, I'm trying to get a contact. One that comes to me was another ham in Austria. And we could hear each other, but the static was so bad. We're trying to exchange call signs and our RSTs. In other words, what level of reception are you getting from me that confirms that you have a contact? And it took us 3 to 4 minutes. That's in a lifetime in ham radio. Just slowly turning the dial on the gain, turning the volume, recalling. He's trying to get to me, I'm trying to get to him. And through all the static, and we finally, after 3 minutes or so, bingo, we got it. And we were happy, and that was it, So it's the same thing in tuning in the spirit or what have you. Like static comes in heavy, from our noisy earth environment, from distractions, from temptations, all sorts of ego stuff comes in, tries to block that. It doesn't try, it's just there. And you have to try to get through it, keep tuning, breathe slow, tune in and get to it.
And you learn the spiritual patience with the spiritual practice that over time, sometimes we don't get it right, or we dial in and then more static comes into our life, whether it's stress or, an injury or illness or
you
whatever.
get the wrong station. You want classical and you got rock, I thought it was the right.
Right.
I want rock and I got classical or whatever it is,
So you tune back in and you attune to what messages are calling you in that new moment. But I want to double back before we close out then. What happened? What did you feel ultimately happened in that clearing in North Carolina? Did you guys get it? Do you feel like you were able to clear some of that energy away? Or
Yeah. Onion skin, we peeled layer off and have not been compelled to go back. It may be another team goes there and does that.
Yes.
They're a team. We work with hierarchy, right? With the different dimensions that they send us. We don't bring them,
Right.
And we could have made enough of a ground connection for them to complete their work. Again, like I said last time, we're the ground wire. Can't have an electric circuit without a ground. So we're the ground wire, and it's important that we were at the right place at the right time, giving a spiritual path for them to come in on. So I haven't been called to go back there. I made other clearings too. That's it. You did your job. Your part is done. Next,
Right.
I just don't, unless I'm drawn, I'm compelled to go back. Then I'll go back.
And that's of course that attunement, that listening, and that knowing and trusting if there's another team that needs to go, they'll be called.
Yeah.
And you've done your part. Yeah.
At times I've got tremendous confirmations from when these souls do cross over. They actually come back and wave and thank me and all sorts of stuff. It's really kind of unique. It comes in like these very lucid dreams.
Yeah. Wow. It's these interdimensional communications that I know for some listeners who might be hearing a conversation like this for the first time, they might be thinking that's really out there. And
those drinking so early in the morning.
Right.
Yeah.
But to those of us who step further and further into this journey, and we've also experienced the euphoria, the bliss of these deep divine connections and the meaning in this work and being here at this time on the planet, we know the value of what it is that we're doing. And I think more are going to be called to this kind of work in whatever way it might be. Some people might be clearing waterways, healing the energy of water on our planet. It could be all kinds of things. But if we can invite our listeners to listen for what is yours to do is really, really, and if you're not hearing that, look at you're Joseph, you're a perfect example. 50 years later, you're connecting some of these dots, right?
Yeah.
Time isn't linear. It's really, there's a right timing. There's a right timing for an alignment when we are going to be called to do certain things. And if you can be living your life in trust and doing what you said, which is doing our best to connect to our hearts and be a good person and be in
Yeah.
service when we can, when we're called, and the
Mhm.
rest will take care of itself. We don't have to do the summoning. God does the summoning, right? We just have to do our part to remove the barriers to listening
Yeah, within ourselves.
within ourselves.
And that just generally raises the consciousness. You know,
Exactly.
somebody's singing and a beautiful song and everybody else starts to raise and they start to sing the same song, the same words, or chant the same om, whatever it is. It increases the frequency and the vibration, and it starts the echo effect, tuning forks letting off all over the place. You just
Right.
may
And
not
that
see it, but you just do it in faith and humility.
is true faith and humility. And we may, over time, as more awaken, we may be able to use sound healing, as
Mhm.
singing to clear these spaces that still hold some darkness.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And even us, like our podcast is a version of a song. We are sounding into the world and to our listeners, into their lives, this awareness. And I think even that has a healing presence and a healing purpose. That's why I believe in these podcasts. And when we podcast for the foundation, my nonprofit that I'm a co-founder of, Whole Soul School and Foundation, our message that we always reiterate in the beginning of the podcast is that the conversation is the education. And I would say these connections are the sound healing. We're bringing awareness, we're bringing the light to something that was a greater darkness, and we're lifting that negative, we're clearing that negative energy, even in our call, even in our connection right here between you and me.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody tuning in who is willing to know the healing of this planet with us, and that any trapped souls, any darker energies can be released if we will just raise our frequency enough to know and believe that it is cleared.
And yeah, exactly. I agree. And you ask for help too.
And
Don't ask, it don't come. So get on the horn and ask
call
for
in.
help. And I remember when we first, one of the first groups I was with called the Grail Group. Goes back, and there was 12 of us, and we called in for help from the high, because this is when we started going out around the world to do.
Wow.
Some of us went to Egypt. Another lady Renee went to Hawaii. Um, who went where? We kind of spread around the world to do our work, and we called in for help. And I remember being like in a deep meditation while we're doing this, seeing this amphitheater with rings upon rings of souls looking down, going up almost into infinity, all cheering us on, saying, yeah, we're here, just call on us. This is the Grail Group from the high dimensions. We'll work with you. Just call on us, So there's a lot of help up there, but you got to consciously connect to it and
Yes.
ask for help.
Yes.
And sometimes you may not sense it, but you got to persevere, because there's a lot of static in the way.
Right. Even a willingness to believe can help clear some of that static, to say, I know you're there, even if I can't feel you, and you can summon that in. And isn't that the journey to source?
Yeah. That's where that word faith comes in. Mm-hmm.
Faith.
Yeah. Which
There it
I
is.
need at times.
Right. We all do. Right.
Yeah.
We all do. And we deepen it in every experience where we felt we were lacking it, or it was weaker in some way. And then we persevere and we commit to it regardless. And we get stronger in our faith because we were faithful when we were fearful, right? Or we were doubtful.
Yeah, I like that. Faithful when we're fearful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Boy, yeah.
Yeah, it's powerful. Well,
Sure.
I want to thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I think there are probably more stories than that, than what you shared today, but these were some big.
Oh, if I could only tell you.
So this is to be continued, right? Yeah.
If you think it's worth it, yeah, I go and I've got a whole bag full of these things.
For sure, because I
what
think
your readers, your listeners want, or if they're interested in this.
it brings it to life, because a lot of people who don't feel this connection yet, but everybody's being called in their own ways right now. But there's that renaissance, there's that ascension process going on, and the ages, which you and I know a lot about. As people wake up and start to become awake, that there's change that's entering their life and their consciousness, it helps to have these living stories, these energies that have an activational energy to themselves, versus sometimes just reading things flat on a page. I think your stories bring the journey to life.
Yeah. Yes.
It brings it to life.
storytelling is important. It used to be the way of life back before the written word, or even
Right.
during the written. You know, it's good to have that happen because
Yes, it is.
you hear the energy and influxes that you don't hear or sense when you're just reading a story. Even though reading is good, don't get me wrong, but sometimes hearing it
Both.
from the author is, yeah.
Yeah, it's the combination that I think is
Mm.
and I think there's going to be a new level of spiritual seeking and questing and kind of this soul mission work in this way. So these are fantastic conversations, and I just want to thank you again.
Well, thank you for everything you're doing, Marie. Thank you. You are a flower in this garden of flowers, and you're making them bloom even more. So,
Thank you. You
yeah,
know,
doing wonderful work.
and it's the reward that we get. The reward isn't, like you said, the Lamborghini. The reward is how good you feel inside yourself when you're just with yourself, right? How good do you feel on the inside? That's
Yeah, that's important right there.
it
Yeah.
is important.
Mhm.
And I want to thank our listeners for joining us in this podcast and to share this podcast. You might know of people who could benefit from these messages, and you know, to pass these on and sort of pay it forward. And that's what we're doing here, to be a part of this podcast and this conversation that hopefully is igniting and inspiring some positive energy and new pathways for you of understanding yourself and the world around you. And we invite you to visit us at wholesoulmastery.com and Whole Soul Mastery on YouTube and Whole Soul Mastery on any of the platforms that you frequent, at least to see if we're there, because we are expanding and we're on many more platforms as we speak. And until next time, I know Joseph and I send you many blessings. Namaste.
Thank you. Thank you all.